Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining me. Episode number 46 of our series, Muhammad, the Man Who Changed the World. And in our last episode, we mentioned the expedition of Tabuk, where a huge army, 30,000 men, leave Medina, march in the heart of summer to an enemy that doesn't really appear to be imminent. And really, it's just an inconvenient, difficult march. And that's really to sum up what Tabuk was all about. It's also to, I guess, as we said, many benefits. One of it is as a show of strength. Sometimes when you've got an enemy hanging around, and the Ghassanids are this big enemy, the Romans as well, and behind them, to show, your military might is enough to deter as a deterrent. And so this military exercise, a huge army being mobilized in the heart of summer, also makes it very clear that there is no other power in Arabia at the moment. The Prophet ﷺ is the undisputed leader of the Arabian Peninsula. Also, another benefit of Tabuk was that it prepared the next phase of expansion, which would be towards Jerusalem, which will happen in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And it is perhaps most telling. It was the final decisive separation between the Muslims and the Munafiqs. And we said that the only people who did not go on this expedition were people who were known hypocrites. And if you did not attend this battle, this was, as Allah will mention, if you read Surah Tawbah, a lot of Surah Tawbah is about being that this is it. This is the final straw. For those who did not attend this battle, now you are branded a Munafiq, and that is it. Your fate is sealed. And so, amongst the people who had not attended the battle was a well-known, prominent companion, a companion who had done so much for Islam up to this point, and yet he did not attend the battle. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ saw a rider coming up very late, and he said, "How I hope that this will be Ka'b." And the Sahabi's name is Ka'b. We'll talk about Ka'b ibn Malik. And it did not appear to be Ka'b. And the Prophet ﷺ had hoped it would be Ka'b because he was, one of the, core companions of Medina, and yet he is not present in the battle. And so when the Prophet returned, there was a queue of a queue of Munafiqs who was going to give their excuses why they didn't attend. They didn't really care, they just wanted the exemption. And Ka'b is now in this queue. And Ka'b will tell us his own story, what happened. And this is perhaps one of the nicest stories of the Seerah, because Ka'b is telling us in first person what happened. So Ka'b says, I never missed a single battle with the Prophet ﷺ except for Badr. Besides for Tabuk, I was at every battle, every expedition. I was always there. I was always, my name was always to be counted, except Badr. And the Prophet, and he says, and as you know, Badr was not really a battle. It was unexpected, and no one, if you miss Badr, it didn't count against you, and except that those, of course, who attended Badr have a special status. Then he says, however, I have something. I didn't get Badr, but I had something which, in my mind, I have an honor which I would not trade for Badr. So Ka'b says, before he goes into talking about how he made a mistake, he just wants to remind us of who he is, and he says that while he did not attend Badr, he has an honor that in his mind he would not trade for Badr. And what was that? That he was at the pledge of Aqaba. Before the Hijrah, remember, there were an elite group of companions from Medina who managed to convince the Nabi Sallam, come to Medina. They basically established the Hijrah. They were the ones that brought the Hijrah to come. And he says he was of that elite core initial group of people of Medina. So Ka'b is a very, very serious companion. And so he says that I was at Aqaba. Very few were there. I mean, they were only in the very first pledge. There were only 12. And so he's saying that he was of the people at Aqaba, and therefore missing Badr for him, he sort of balances that too. And so he says, and this is my story of remaining back from Tabuk. Never did I possess, so he says, now he's telling the story, he says, did I possess more means, never was I wealthier or in more favorable circumstances than the moment before the expedition. So he says, before the battle, I was actually at my most successful financially. It's amazing. Ka'b is saying it's amazing that I was actually in the most favorable position before the battle, and yet I didn't attend the battle. And by Allah, I had never before in my life had two animals. Now remember, a lot of people who could not go on the expedition of Tabuk, one of the reasons were, as Allah mentions in the Quran, they could not find an animal to take them. Ka'b says, never in my life did I have two vehicles. And now, before the Battle of Tabuk, I actually had two animals. Allah's messenger set out for this expedition in the extremely hot season. The journey was long, and the land which would be covered was waterless. And he had to confront, in their minds, they were going to confront a large army. So the Nabi, so Ka'b is saying, the Prophet informed us about the situation so that they should prepare adequately for the expedition. So the Prophet gave the army notice, look, we're going to have a long march. So you need to prepare adequately, and this is before the Muslims didn't have a sort of standing army. You didn't have a budget. This is for the army. Every single man would equip himself. He would buy his own armor. He would buy his own animal. He would take his own provisions with him. So you have to go with your own gear. And the Prophet had given everybody notice, prepare, and we're going to leave soon, so that they should adequately equip themselves for this expedition. And he also told them the destination so he told them, we're going to go all the way to Tabuk, so they know it's a far destination. And the Muslims who accompanied the Messenger at the time were large in number. But they were not, so Ka'b is saying that we did not know, we just knew it was a huge number of people. Then Ka'b said, few were the persons who wanted to be absent themselves and were under the impression that they could easily conceal themselves. And thus remain undetected. So because of the huge number, Ka'b is saying some people thought that they could remain undetected until a revelation from Allah basically descended about them. And Allah's messenger set out on an expedition, and he's saying, and also, so Ka'b says, for those who didn't want to attend, the munafiqs, they felt that if we weren't present, we would not have been known. And even, if they knew, then they would have an excuse. Now, Ka'b continues, the Prophet set out on the expedition when the fruits were very ripe, and it was time to be harnessed or be harvested. And then he said, I had a weakness for them. And it was during this season that the messenger made preparations for the Muslims to go with him. So Ka'b says, at this time he wanted to, take his harvest, and he had invested and grew his fruits, and now was the time to leave. And so he said, look, I delayed preparing for the battle while I was busy harvesting. So Ka'b is saying, he's talking about procrastination, that I was so busy with my harvest, and I said, look, I'll prepare. I'll get my camels, I'll get my goods, I'll get everything. And so he said, then I would sit out in the morning so that I should make preparations for the battle, meaning he always intended to join the battle. But then I came back and I had done nothing, and said to myself, I have means enough to make preparation as soon as I like. So then he kept saying, it's okay. Tomorrow, I have the money, I have the resources, I just need to go and do it. And so he delays. Everything else becomes more pressing. SubhanAllah, how many of us do this? There's something good we need to do, salah, whatever it might be, and we tell ourselves, I've got some time. Oh, the adhan has come in for dhuhr. There's still 2-3 hours left. We'll make it later. I'm still finishing up my meeting. I'm finishing up my email after the email, and the time keeps going. And Ka'b, in his mind, I'll go tomorrow and I will sort myself out. And I went out doing this, postponing my preparation until people were about to depart. And it was the morning that Allah's messenger set out, and the Muslims too along with him, but I made no preparation. The day had come and people were beginning to leave. And he had made no preparations. And now he realizes, oh crap, I had waited now, and it is the part to delay. And then he still said, I went out early in the morning, and he thought, okay, today is the day. The army has left. Today is the day I'm going to prepare, and I'll catch up with the army. And he went out in the morning, and I came back, and I made no decision. And I continued to do so until the Muslims hastened and covered a good deal of distance. Right? So again, subhanAllah, Ka'b is not able to give an excuse, and he himself is like surprised how he procrastinated. And he told himself, I will do it. There's a hadith, this is at-tasweef min ash-shaytan. Tasweef means sofa, I will, sofa, not a couch, meaning I shall. He's saying this to himself, it's still not due, it's still not out of reach. Tomorrow, I go buy my stuff, and I can race, and I can catch up with the army. And but then as the days continue to go, and he realizes that the distance was long, and he says, I made up my mind to march and to meet them, but still in my mind, I'm going to get ready, and I'll go tomorrow, and I'll march and meet him. And would that I'd done that, but perhaps it was not destined for me. So Ka'b says, he's regretting, and how I wish I had just made the decision to leave and catch up with the army, but he did not do so. Remember, Ka'b stayed behind. After the departure of Allah's messenger, as I went out amongst people. So now when he says he noticed, he went out after the army had left, and I was shocked to find that I did not find anyone like me, but people who were labeled as hypocrites, or the people whom Allah had granted exemption because of their incapacity. And Allah's Messenger took no notice of me until I had reached Tabuk, until he had reached Tabuk. And so Ka'b is saying, as once the army had left and Medina was empty, and he would go around and he would see the only people in Medina were those who were known hypocrites. Everybody knew that this was a hypocrite. And in every community we know that uncle or that person, he is who he is. And people who had been given permission to remain behind because of a known infirmity. They were crippled, they were sick, they were too old, they were too young. And Ka'b is saying, and Ka'b obviously is not being on the expedition, but he was told about this, that the Prophet ﷺ did not mention my name. So in the army, the Nabi ﷺ had not mentioned my name until he reached Tabuk. And one day, as he was sitting amongst the people in Tabuk, the Prophet said, "What happened to Ka'b?" The Prophet ﷺ is now, and it's amazing. One of the secrets of, again, a leader, he's got 30,000 people in his army. Would he really notice one person missing? But he notices Ka'b is missing. It also shows you that Ka'b is of the elite group of people, that he is not just anyone. That the Prophet ﷺ is noticing one of my top guys are not here. And so he says, "What happened? Where's Ka'b?" And Ka'b is telling us, a person from a certain tribe said, Allah's Messenger, "Oh Allah's Messenger, the beauty of his cloak and his appreciation of his sides have allured him, and he was thus detained." Meaning he became too lazy for his comforts, and he was too, basically the enjoyment of the dunya detained him. And another companion says, "Woe to you, woe be upon you that what you said to by Allah, we know nothing but good of Ka'b." So another companion, Mu'adh, and it's amazing that Ka'b is saying, someone said something negative about me. Ka'b obviously knows who, but Ka'b is not saying his name. But then he says, but Mu'adh ibn Jabal, famous companion, the companion who would be the governor of Yemen, he says, "How can you speak so badly about Ka'b? Ka'b is a good guy, he's one of us." So Ka'b mentions the name of Mu'adh, but he doesn't mention the name of the man who, insulted him. Allah Alam, again, Ka'b this is the adab of the Sahaba with each other. And then the Messenger, however, kept quiet. The Nabi Sallam is neither approving of Mu'adh or the man who said something. And it was during that time that the Holy Prophet saw a person, right? And here, as we mentioned this, that the Prophet saw a person dressed in white, shattering the illusion of the eye like a mirage. It's like a guy in white and he's coming out of the desert like a mirage. And the Nabi said, "May this person be," the Messenger said, "may he be Abu Khaytama." And lo, it was Abu Khaytama al-Ansari. And it was that person who contributed a sa' of dates and was scoffed at by the hypocrites. So this man is coming, and the Prophet said, this is Abu Khaytama. And who's Abu Khaytama? And Ka'b is mentioning, in the Quran you find a man who gave a little bit of dates, a handful of dates in charity, and the hypocrites teased him in front of him. Now Abu Khaytama is so poor, he doesn't even have gold, he gives dates. I mean, imagine, subhanAllah. And I want us to think of it in wallahi, think of it in our day and age. The masjid is collecting money. The bags in most masjids, now it's tapped, right? But you have a towel, and people put a few cents, some put paper, mashallah. You imagine someone, he takes out a sweet, or he takes out some dates, and he puts that in the towel. Wallahi, the masjid will be offended by this man. They will say, "Are you making a joke of us? Are you insulting us?" But this man is giving what he eats. "This is my food for the day, for the week. I'm putting that in the towel because that's all I have." Abu Khaytama did this. And so obviously, if this is all he had, he did not expect that he'll be able to go on the battle because he doesn't have an animal. But somehow, through his sincerity and through his persistence, he managed to get an animal, and he races and he catches up with the army. And so Ka'b further said, "When the news reached me that Allah's Messenger was on his way back from Tabuk, it was too late." So now he knows the army has reached its destination and it's turned back and it's coming now. It's too late. He passed due. Even if he arrives, even if he leaves now and he meets the army, it's too late. It doesn't count. He missed the battle. Or he missed what would have been the battle. And he said, "This greatly disturbed me." Now he is panicking. And I thought, and now while the army is coming back, he's thinking of all kinds of stories. What can I do? How can I lie? How can I get out of this? So he tells us, "I thought of fabricating false stories, and asked myself, how would I save myself from his anger? On the following day, so he says in this case, so I sought the help of every prudent man from amongst the members of my family. So now he's asking his family, what should I do? What should I say? What should I do? And when it was said to me that Allah's messenger was about to arrive, so now he's already planning his excuse. He's got an elaborate lie he's going to tell. And he said, when the Nabi arrived, all the false ideas vanished from my mind, and I came to the conclusion that nothing could save me but the truth. So Ka'b, mashallah, he realizes now, I might as well face the truth, and I have no excuse. I have no excuse. I'm going to tell him the truth. So I'm going to resign myself to the truth. So I decided to speak the truth, and it was in the morning that the messenger arrived in Medina, and it was his habit that as he came back from a journey, he first went to the mosque and he prayed 2 rak'ahs nafil and then sat amongst the people. And as he did that, those who remained behind began to put forward their excuses, and they began to swear and promise and make all kinds of lies and stories up. And the Nabi Sallam would accept whatever excuse and he would make dua. So the Nabi Sallam's, again, you imagine this: the teacher, the lecturer. We don't give we can't give an analogy in that. But imagine the professor, and he says there was a due date. Who missed the due date? Who didn't submit the assignment? And a group of people come and they said, "Yeah, sir, we missed the due date because we were sick. We were traveling. I submitted it, but there was an internet problem. My dog ate my assignment." And every lame, silly, stupid excuse, he would accept and he would make dua for them. And Nabi Sallam did not investigate, give me evidence, I want proof. He just accepted and wrote it off. And so Ka'b says 80 people came to him to make some lame excuse. People who he knew were munafiqs, Allah's messenger, accept the excuses on the very face of them, and he would accept the excuses on the very face of them, and accepted their allegiance, and he would make dua for their forgiveness, and he left their secrets with Allah. He just left it, that's between you and Allah. Until I presented myself to him. Right? I presented myself to him. And I greeted him. So now Ka'b is in the queue, and now he greeted him. And the Prophet smiled at me, but it was a smile of anger. The Nabi Sallallahu made a different face. We looked at Ka'b, and Nabi's face changed. He's smiling at Ka'b, but he's like angry. And it's almost to say, Ka'b, you are not supposed to be in this queue. How can you be with these people? And he then said to me, come forward. And I went forward until I sat in front of him. And he said to me, what kept you back? Ka'b, what's your story? And could you not afford to go for a ride? And now the Prophet is asking him, were you not able to get some kind of, did you not have the money? Didn't you find a camel? And I said, Ya Rasulullah, now Ka'b is saying, if I were to sit in the presence of anybody else from amongst the worldly people, I would have definitely saved myself from his anger on one pretext or the other. I would have invented something. And I have also the knack to fall into, so he says, I also have the ability to argue and the ability to debate. He's a witty guy. But by Allah, I am fully aware of the fact that if I were to put forward before you a false excuse to please you, Allah will definitely provoke His wrath upon me. So Ka'b is saying, Ya Rasulullah, I'm not going to make up a story to avert your anger, and in exchange Allah will be angry with me. But if I speak the truth, you may be annoyed with me. So he says, Ya Rasulullah, if I speak the truth, you might be upset with me, but I hope Allah will forgive me. And there is no valid, so he says, there is no valid excuse for me. Ya Rasulullah, I'm coming to tell you, I have absolutely no excuse for this. And then he says, by Allah, I never possessed more good, more wealth than I have now. And I was never more favor, I'm healthy, everything. And I stayed behind, and I have zero excuse. He can't even explain why he stayed behind. Purely procrastination. Thereupon Allah's Messenger said, he raised his voice, this man has told the truth. Interesting, the Nabi didn't say this about the other liars, the munafiqs. He said, this man has told the truth. So get up until Allah gives the decision upon your case. So now he says, Ka'b, leave. You are basically like banished until Allah has decreed what to do upon you. So I stood up, and some people of another tribe, Banu Salama, followed me in haste. And they said to me, Banu Salama is his tribe. And they ran and they said, by Allah, we do not know about you that you committed a sin prior to this. The family said, how could you do this? You were one of our best, our most pious people. How could you do this? However, you showed inability to put forward an excuse before the Rasulullah. And they stayed behind, and the others put excuses. It would have been enough. So now his family and his relatives gang up on him, and they said, how could you do this? How could you put yourself in this situation? Didn't you see all the 80 guys going? And talking some nonsense, and he accepted their excuse, and he made dua, and his dua will stop Allah's anger. Subhanallah. So they're telling him, Ka'b, what you did was, you're silly. Go and make up an excuse. Let him not be angry with you, and and he will make dua for you, and Allah will forgive you this mistake. It would have been enough for the forgiveness of your sin that Allah's Messenger would have made dua for you. By Allah, and so now it says, Ka'b says, they continue to incite me, they continue to push me and hassle him until I thought of going back and contradicting myself. He thought eventually his family, his friends, overpowered him and convinced him go make up a lie and he was about to go back. And then as he was about to go, he said, hold on. Has there been anyone else that did the same like me? Is there anyone else that is in the same boat like me? And they said, yes, there are two people like you. And they mentioned their names, and the same fate has fallen to you, and they have made the same statement as you have made. They also came to Nabi Sallam saying, Ya Rasulullah, we missed the battle, we have no excuse. And the same verdict was delivered on them, meaning they were pushed. The Prophet said, you two are pushed out, Allah will determine what to do with you. And he said, who are these two people? And they said, it is Murara ibn al-Rabi'ah and Hilal ibn Umayyah. So two Sahabis, Murara and Hilal. And they made a mention of these two pious persons. So Ka'b said, these are two pious people. And they are people who were at Badr. These are two Badris. So these are two amazing people. SubhanAllah, we don't know the Sahaba, right? We've never heard of Murara and Hilal before. But he's saying, when Ka'b heard these two people, now, in Ka'b's mind, I have that 80 scum that were known to be hypocrites, known to be munafiqs. And I have two here, Murara and Hilal. Murara and Hilal confessed, we made a mistake, we're telling the truth, and we will subject ourselves to the punishment. And Ka'b says, I will rather be with these two than with that 80. I went away with when they mentioned the two names, and Allah's Messenger forbade the Muslims. So Allah's judgment was, the punishment was, the three of us, no one should talk to us. Nobody should interact with us. We should be shunned until Allah decides what to happen. And the people began to avoid us, and their attitude towards us underwent a change. And it seemed as if though the whole atmosphere had turned hostile against us. So he's saying that the same city, he lived his whole life in Medina. The same city, the same faces became difficult for me. And it became like the world was crouching in upon me. And we spent 50 nights in this very state. And my two friends confined themselves within their houses and spent most of the time weeping. So Ka'b is saying, the other two, Murara and Hilal, they stayed at home and they couldn't bear going out. They just stayed in the house. They could not bear the looks and the shunning. They would talk to people, Assalamu alaikum, and nobody would respond to them. And so he said that the two of them could not bear it anymore, and they stayed in their house and they didn't come out. But I was younger and stronger than them. So Ka'b says, I was younger than them, and I got out and I participated in congregational prayer. SubhanAllah, even though he's being shunned, he still goes to the masjid. And he's still making jama'ah salah, even though no one is looking at him, no one is greeting him, no one is making eye contact with him. He is, SubhanAllah, everyone is making a point to avoid him. He's got like a disease. And Ka'b is like, I'm still going to the masjid. And I still moved about in the bazaar, but nobody spoke to me. And I came to Allah's Messenger after the prayer, and I greeted him and asked myself whether his lips stirred in response to my greetings. And Ka'b would still go, SubhanAllah. It's so beautiful. Ka'b says, I would still go to him after salah and I would greet him. Of course, the Nabi Sallam is not acknowledging him. But he said, it's as if though I could see his lips moving. And you can almost imagine the Prophet himself, his heart is breaking for Ka'b, but he is showing this wall of seriousness. And he said, I would observe prayer beside him and looked at him with stealing glances. I would look at him with stealing glances, and while I attended to my prayer, he looked at me. When I cast a glance at him, he turned away, his eyes away from me. So Ka'b is saying that I would come close to him and I would look at him and he would not look at me. And I would try to look at him, and then when I would make salah, and I would notice that when I looked away, the Prophet is looking at him. So when Ka'b is looking away, the Prophet is showing him attention. It's almost like the Prophet wants to speak to him, wants to make dua for him, he's making dua for him, wants to connect with him. But the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is avoiding him. And when Ka'b would look at him and they met their eyes, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would look away. And so Ka'b says, when the harsh treatment of the Muslims towards me extended to a considerable length of time, I walked out, I climbed upon the wall of the garden of one of my cousin, and I had the greatest of love for him. So he goes to his like dearest and closest cousin, who's like a brother, and I greeted him. But by Allah, he did not respond to me. Assalamu alaikum, and he did not respond to me. I said to him, "Oh Abu Qatada, I beg you by Allah, aren't you well aware of the fact that I love Allah and His Messenger?" He's saying, "Yeah, Abu Qatada, Ka'b is crying now. He's saying, "Guys, you know I'm one of the good guys. You know that I'm a Muslim. You know I'm with Allah. I'm with His Rasul. You know that I'm on your team." And he absolutely ignored him. Abu Qatada ignored him completely. And Ka'b says, I again repeated saying, I beg you by Allah, you know that I love Allah and I love His Rasul the most. And again he kept quiet. And Ka'b is screaming. My eyes began to shed tears. And I came back climbing, and he's crying now. And all Abu Qatada says, Allah knows best. Meaning, that's the only response he heard. Allah knows best. Meaning, I'm not going to say yes or no. And Ka'b says, I was crying and I came back climbing down from leaving his house, and I was walking in the bazaar of Medina, and someone came to me, a Syrian, and they basically said that if you were to leave Medina, the king of the Ghassanids, they would take you. So subhanallah, his situation is so severe that an outsider is telling him that, you know what, I see how everyone is treating you. Why don't you just leave Medina and go and join the enemy, go and join the Ghassanids? And in fact, he's given a letter. Now subhanallah, Ka'b must be someone serious, because he gets an invitation to leave Medina and go to the Ghassanids. And he reads this letter, and after he said, this is all a this is all a test. So I burned that letter in the oven. He said that this letter, and the letter says, it has been conveyed to us that your friend Muhammad is subjecting you to cruelty, and Allah has not created you for a place where you are to be degraded and where you cannot find your right place. So come to us that we should honor you. SubhanAllah, he has an invitation from the enemy to come and join them. And Ka'b is saying, Allah is really testing me now, and he burns the letter. And so Ka'b says, when out of the 50 days, 40 days had passed. So for 50 days they were going to be shunned. 40 of them had passed. The messenger received no revelation. They came to Allah's messenger. He said, verily Allah's messenger has commanded you to remain separate from your wives. So now, after 40 days, the only people that could engage with these three men were their wives. And now the command was their wives should also leave them. And I said, should I divorce her? Or what else should I do? When he asked, should I divorce her? And so he's ready to divorce his wife. If Allah wants me to separate, should I divorce her? And inshallah we'll continue in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.